So, good evening. I just wanted to say that I was Kevin McEnroe's writing teacher when he was an undergraduate some years ago. And I want to say that you never know, out of all the students who come through, who will and who won't. You know, a lot of people are very gifted, and you don't know who will and who won't. Brecht once said that writing a novel requires first maturity of the backside. And I have to say, I'm very proud of this gifted young man who really stuck with it and got it right. So here's Kevin McEnroe.
Yeah!
What's up, guys? Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, Kevin!
I'm gonna read first.
Yay! Sorry, I love you, Kevin. I love you, Kevin.
Love you, Em.
We all love you, Kevin.
I love you guys too. Okay, here I go. I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. Dorothy arrived at the party before her husband. After the movie, which was a bore, Dale dropped her off at the Hollywood Hotel and then drove home to pick up a different shirt. The one he'd wore to itch him, he said. You overstarched it again. And he said he couldn't wear it another minute. Not another minute. But that most likely was just an excuse to be alone. Dorothy walked to the bar. The hotel's decor was earthy but still oddly matte. Green leaves sprouted from potted plants at the corners of the room, and an Indian man wore a tan suit with white bucks with gum soles besides a painting of a red sun rising while a ship below sank. The room was filled to the brim with people, but the Indian stood alone. He leaned against the painting and it tilted slightly. He listened to a girl with a strawberry blonde bob play the guitar. Girls who play guitar don't have nice fingers. Dorothy never understood those girls at all, not even a little. The guitarist played Fur Elise and sat beside a dartboard. In the room's center burned a gas fire from a black chrome fireplace, a fire that you could turn on and off with a switch that sat on the damper. And along the leather couches were royal blue and apple red feather pillows. Dorothy arrived at the bar. There was a line of people. She waited for her turn for a drink. Fatigue had struck her, and as she licked her dry lips and tasted the stink of incense and patchouli, she reached into her purse for her cherry chapstick. She applied her cherry chapstick, and God, I'm annoying, and then licked her lips, and she was better. She put it back. I'll have a white wine, I think, she said as she reached the front of the line. The bartender wore a tuxedo and had a moon face with his hair parted neatly to the side. He corkscrewed a bottle and poured full a plastic highball and handed it to her. Dorothy walked around the party, switching her plastic glass of wine from one hand to the other, from time to time making her way back to the bar. It was crowded, but she'd begun to enjoy herself. She knew some of the guests from when she used to go to her own premieres years prior. They remembered her and they missed her. Many asked why she'd stopped. She wanted to be a good mother, she replied. Really, though, there wasn't room for two successes in her household. Too much personality. One person had to float while the other floundered. One sailed, one sank. Highs and lows. Peaks and valleys. It didn't matter which one, she thought. It used to be her, but now this had to be. In this world, on this side of the country, there are some people who carry the piano and some people who play the piano. But Dorothy wanted both. But, again, Dorothy had begun to enjoy herself, enjoy the party. She was chatting and being cordial, and then she started laughing, even laughing, and nobody judged her. She was free for the time being. It had been a while. Nobody told her what to do. And as the hours passed, people's ties began to loosen. Then, from above, Dorothy saw Dale enter. She was upstairs and could see the front door from her vantage point between the shoulders of two men. She was speaking with two executives who had some ideas about her career, and from below they were all you could see. They said they could help get her back to where she was and even further, that she should be in the movies, that she should have a name, her own name, and that she should be on top like she was supposed to. And she was talented, and she was prettier than she ever was. She liked to hear that. My goodness, she loved it. As Dale walked in, though, the party was at its most full, so he couldn't see Dorothy's ear to ear. She began to see her name in lights, marqueed, and she smiled, and the suits then further beamed. He changed into a red shirt, and, paired with his green evening jacket, he looked like a Christmas card. Dorothy wore white. She was over statement pieces. I mean, in terms of what she wore. Dale looked around the front of the room, but he didn't see her. Then he walked to the back. He looked up for a moment, toward the second floor, but he couldn't see past the men in suits. Dorothy saw him, though, and pushed between their arms. "Dale!" She hung out over the railing. "Dale," she called again, but the music was loud and he didn't hear. "Dale," she called again, but again he didn't notice. People were dancing near the entrance, and a woman swung around and elbowed him between his shoulder blades. She apologized, but he got angry because she hurt him, so he left. He slammed the door behind him once he'd walked through. So Dorothy shoved her way along the wall, down the stairs, making herself small, across the makeshift dance floor, and then finally outside. She followed. She saw him walking toward the parking lot. He was nearing their car. In his eyes, his car. "Dale," she yelled. "Dale," she yelled again. He turned around. He finally saw her, but he kept his mouth closed shut. "Come back, baby. I was just upstairs." She reached him and reached for his forearm, but he pushed her off. "I'm having the best time, baby. Why are you leaving? You just got here. I was only just upstairs." Dale stared at her, this time longer than before. He grabbed the sides of her head. He pressed his hands around her ears and then held tightly onto her hair. "I missed you, baby. It's good to see your face," Dorothy said and closed her eyes and opened her mouth and waited for Dale to kiss her to say hello. But he just looked at her. Then he headbutted her as hard as he could. Her head whipped back as her nose started bleeding, and she tried to put her hands to her face, but he blocked them. He still held her by the ears. He took a clump of her hair and wiped at the blood pouring from her nostrils. He watched it pool up at the edge of her lip and dye her split ends hot red. And then he let go. He left and went back to the party. Dorothy fell to the ground in a ball. She cried and cried. Her face was ruined and her hair was ruined. Her tears mixed with her blood as she wiped her face with the back of her hand, and soon it was covered in a mucousy, salty pink. The valet, who had looked away when Dale was with Dorothy, walked over to her. A long, black Johnny Chen mustache framed his face like mouse hair, and his name tag read Chulo. He reached down to help Dorothy up. "Are you okay?" he asked. She breathed through her mouth, not through her nose. "I guess I'll be okay," she said. She'd stopped crying, but still she bled. He pulled her up and steadied her. He rubbed her back and she leaned into his arms. "Do you want me to get security?" asked Chulo. "No," she replied, and sighed and pushed off Chulo. Her nose still ran bloody. She breathed through her mouth. "I just need to clean up." She made her way inside to the inside bathroom with her head down. She borrowed Chulo's grease rag to cover her face. She draped it over her forehead and got through without being noticed. With a piece of tissue pushed up her nostril to clot the bleeding, she attempted to make up her face. The swelling would be hard to hide. After she finished with a layer of foundation, only just foundation, she heard a knock at the door. "I'm in here," she shouted. She was angry and had already taken something for the pain. But now she was really hurting. "I know, ma'am. This is Eddie from security." He stopped and then continued. "I have someone with me, someone who says he knows you. Your husband, actually, he claims. Is it fine if he comes in?" God. "No, it isn't, actually. Tell him I'm busy and I don't want to see him or talk." "What did you say, ma'am?" "I'm sorry?" "That I don't want to see him or talk." She could hear them speaking from behind the door, but couldn't make out what they were saying. The music was too loud. "He says he wants to apologize," Eddie shouted over the noise. "He says he's sorry." Dorothy sighed again, this time through her nose. Her brick-red tissue clot fell out into the sink and blood ink ran along the porcelain. Blood continued falling from her nose and past her lips, and she tasted it. Mixed with her makeup, she didn't mind. She balled up another tissue square and patted her face and then put it up her nostril. She looked at herself. She looked ugly. She hated herself again. She'd forgotten about the executives. "Fine," she replied. She turned the lock counterclockwise, lefty-loosey, and Eddie opened the door and peeked in. He was handsome, tough handsome. "You all right?" he asked. "Real sweet?" "Yeah, it's fine, thank you." "No problem, ma'am. I'm going to let him in, okay?" She nodded. Dale entered, his once slickly parted hair now hanging down before his eyes, covering the bump, his unicorn, he'd procured on his forehead. His shirt was more open than before. He sucked in through his nostrils and felt more energetic, alive again. These days he only breathed through his nose. "Let me look at you," he said quietly, and he grabbed her face again. He turned it from side to side in his palms. He was checking if he'd done enough damage. Then he held it straight and looked back at her, flat in the eyes. He let go with his right hand and he slapped her. Then he slapped her face again. "Don't ever embarrass me like that again," he said, coolly, calmly. I told the people we were coming together as man and wife. And then I can't find you. And I asked someone, and they'd say, you're upstairs talking to two guys. Two guys. Do you consider that acceptable behavior? As a married woman, you think that that's okay? Dorothy rested her face against Dale's hand. She could feel her cheeks getting hotter. She thought she must look red. Redder than before even. Tomato-faced. Do you hear me? Dale asked, and then let go. Dorothy turned towards the sink, away from him. She squeezed the porcelain in her hand until a fake nail cracked off and landed against the blood clot tissue. Let's hope so, Dale affirmed. Then he opened the door and left. He left the door open behind him. Dorothy looked up at herself in the mirror. She grabbed a new tissue and blew out the old tissue and threw them both in the toilet and watched them tie-dye the water as she flushed. She took a cab home. Dale took the car. She was nervous as she entered the house and walked upstairs to the bedroom. The lights were still on. She crept through the door and saw Dale on the bed. He lay in his underwear and dinner socks with the TV remote in one hand and the rocks glass, the same rocks glass as before, in the other. An ice pack rested against his head. He looked up at her. I kind of hurt myself, if you can believe it, he said, chuckling. Then he looked back towards the TV. A lot of work.
I almost tried to read.
Yeah. Is this, hello?
Wow.
How'd I do?
Amazing.
Pretty well.
Pretty well.
You have... Oh, my mic. Okay, sorry. Is that right? No, that's not. Sorry. No idea what to say. I can't do email on it.
We'll just use this one.
Okay. There you go. Anyway, so here we are in this vast hall. It's very striking. It's mastery of technique, where you can indicate psychology or the atmosphere of an event or personality in the details. So I remember that people always said that one learned to write by reading. And so I'm curious, which novelist, or was there a novelist who made you think that I want to do this, I can do this? When did you start reading books in that way? That one that sort of you always looked at them and thought?
When I was younger, I read a lot, but it wasn't until I read, certain things that sort of, where people were challenging the way, like they were doing different things and they were doing things on their own. I really didn't think I could be a writer, like as a profession, until I read this Hemingway quote from A Movable Feast, which was like, we ate well and cheaply and drank well and cheaply and slept well and warm together and loved each other. And I thought, okay, you can do whatever you want,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, if I can do whatever I want, then I can do this, And then I later on reading sort of Joan Didion and people like that, where there was sort of I always liked the idea that there was like it was like there's I and then there's Kevin. There was like a narratorial presence in these things that I understood and I responded to, and that's what meant. When I'm writing a lot, to be honest, I actually try not to read that much because I try to use whatever I can I don't want to take anything.
I don't mean when you're writing.
Before.
I meant what made you think
the Hemingway thing was the biggest one. Yeah, that was the one where I thought I could do this. That's the one where I thought, as long as I can do it my own way, then this is something I'm interested in doing. Yeah.
Why were you so sure there was your own way? I mean, I remember your first story. Why do you think that was true?
Well, sorry, I'm hot.
Take it off.
What was his grade?
He always did very well. He worked very hard.
A+.
Yeah.
True story.
I'm trying to
why
get
did
him
I
to
think
talk
it was-
about certain weird things he did even as a student, which was a terrific compression and condensation of style. So you could get in dialogue the whole kind of sociology of these characters just from the way they spoke. He has a very great ear.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm tired of complimenting you. You have to talk more. What made you think there was such a thing as my way that young?
Honestly, it was you. I mean, I didn't have anybody really tell me. No, I'm serious. I didn't really have anybody tell me. I just sort of did something the way I wanted to do it, and I just figured I was going to get a bad grade, like I usually did. And when you responded to it, and you told me to sort of keep doing it in this way, and I had this, there was something I found in like in compression. At first, I used to pretend it was because I didn't like, I just couldn't write. Like if somebody said 15 pages, I was like, oh my god, you know. So I'd write 9 that I thought were really good. You know, and that was like, and then it became like a thing where it was like I actually liked having these short scenes that meant something. You know, I didn't like sort of creating. I wanted to have scenes with just dialogue and scenes where it was about what was in the room. It was about what people were wearing, and it was about the exact words that they said. You know, I was very interested. It's hard for me to write long sometimes because each sentence means the world to me. You know, each sentence means sort of I can't, you know, sort of keep going until I think it's perfect. You know?
Wow.
And that takes me a really, really long time, unfortunately. I started this 9 years ago in your class.
Oops.
Yeah.
But, you know, I sort of recognized something because I had, as a professor when I was an undergraduate, a writer named Elizabeth Hardwick, who used to tell us that try to be more expansive, because for her, the curse of her life was that she couldn't expand. She was too compressed, and she remembered when she was a student, she would take exams, and then she would stop, and everyone else was still writing, and she wondered, what the hell were they saying?
Up to, yeah.
Because she couldn't bear to tell the professor what he already knew. And so she got C's and D's because she just couldn't sort of repeat things. So I thought when I read that first story of yours, that was just these lines on a page and very filled
in a
out.
way, that's what I thought too.
That's what I thought, yeah.
If it wasn't because I didn't think you were gonna think it was good. You know, I just thought that was something that I couldn't bear to do something that I thought was boring.
There's that.
You know, I couldn't bear to write things. So in writing, like you preferred when I would sort of write what I thought was good. Emily, what I thought was good.
So handsome.
For crying out loud.
I should just
What
say it louder.
No, you shouldn't say
Do you
it
know
louder.
these people?
These are my sisters.
So handsome.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Family.
That's important.
Yeah. What was I saying?
Which leads me, finish what you were saying.
I don't remember. I mean, that I didn't.
You didn't want to be bored with what you were doing.
No, and I think until your class, I was always bored with school.
Well, that's very kind.
I mean it. I was always, I couldn't connect to anything. I could do okay, but I couldn't connect to anything in a real way, and there was something about, you know, writing it, doing it sort of my own way that really meant the world to me, and that's when I really responded and sort of read. I realized what school was for because of your class.
Oh, that's very cool.
Because I thought it was
a very good
just
class. It wasn't
totally
me,
boring.
It was also your peers.
Yeah,
And they all
but I mean, so
encouraged one
it's
another.
sort of serendipitously worked out in that way for
Yeah.
me, where it was like there was this class that was like so inspiring each week. I'd look forward to it. I really only took it at that time because it met once a week. And I was like, and it was at night. I was like, beautiful. You know what I mean? I don't have to
I
wake
hear you.
up. And then it was like, but then there was something real that happened there with me. And I can only thank you for that, you know.
Well, no. And so how is it that early on you hit on this particular subject matter, this character?
I think it was by accident. It was because we had an assignment where it was write in the opposite sex. And I had never done that. I'd never really, you know, and one of the first things I did happened to be this sort of idea where this, you know, grandmother by herself is with her grandson, who I guess was based on me at the time, and how he viewed her, I guess, so differently than everybody else did. Because he didn't know her past, and he didn't know anything else. He could just see her as his nana, and he could think that that was okay, and I thought, and then after that, I would write other stuff, but I just kept coming back to it. I kept chasing this understanding of why was I interested in her? And I think I realized in the end it has to do with she had an ability to not feel like she deserved success and sort of fear success. And then so when good things began to happen, she would sabotage it. She'd fuck it up. And I have that in me. Certainly. I don't have it not like she does, but I have it in me, and I was grappling with why. And why I felt that way. And I almost think it's genetic in a lot of ways. I almost think that something in me sometimes doesn't let me succeed and let me, and I'm only recently realizing that and battling it. I almost thought I was just failing, and it was like, no, there was things that I could do that I just wasn't doing. It was my own fault. And that's how I always felt like she, there was good things that were happening, and she just wouldn't let them happen. Because why her? I don't deserve that.
Well, it worked out in writerly terms because you were able to imagine a character with very sort of compelling conflict.
Right.
And sort of, you write with empathy, but also distance.
Yeah.
So it's very important. Do you write, as we sort of sneak into talking about your practice, do you write by pen or pencil or straight onto the computer?
Sometimes I'll write straight onto the computer, but sometimes if I get stuck, staring at the same paragraph over and over again and feeling like it's not right, I will switch to just getting like a legal pad, and that makes it easier for me. My handwriting is so bad; it makes it easier for me to just go. And I like to put on music that I think matches the rhythm of what I'm trying to write, and I just sort of try and get up like a sort of momentum going. And so I can do both. I only can edit with pen and paper. I have to print it out and edit that way. I can't edit on the computer.
Do you read aloud?
Not enough, clearly. Yeah, no, I was just kidding, but I don't, and I should, because it does help me. Even when I was reading it aloud up there's stuff that reads differently than how I read it aloud, and I almost, I caught myself and went, if I can only change that now, so I do feel...
That will never go away.
Right. That, I was like, I wanted to I was like, stop the presses. I need to fix this sentence.
No.
So, I do both, I guess, but I can only edit when it's printed out, and I go too slow when I'm writing on the computer.
Really?
Yeah, I just keep fiddling with the same sentences.
Well, that's the one thing about the computer is that you can keep going over and over and again and making different choices.
Keep constantly, because it's so easy to fix things. Yeah. It almost makes it hard for me to just sort of go.
Right.
At times.
So you listen to music to get the rhythm or to keep the rhythm going in your head?
Yeah, I like to
language
match.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't listen to stuff, I listen to stuff that I know well, so I don't catch the lyrics, and it's just like the sort of mood helps me, obviously when something like that, I wanted to sort of, it's both the rhythm of the song, but it's also the mood. I need to stay in that space. I need to stay in that space of like feeling that, and I remember after I wrote that, I was really like, I had really high adrenaline, and I was really like, because it was, it's like writing about hurting somebody. You think you're just doing it, and you think it's fake, and then it's like I felt like I hurt somebody.
So the solitude of writing has never bothered you?
No. At times, like I bartended for a long time, and it was almost a nice pairing where I'd be by myself, and then I'd be like in a super social atmosphere. So now I'm sort of wandering around my house during the day, by myself, like feeling like,
freaking yourself out,
and like I'll go write, but then I'll just be like, mate, where are the people, and why am I refolding all of this laundry, and I'm like fiddling with pictures on the wall. It's sometimes I do find without that other super social aspect, I have to do a way better job of making plans, because otherwise I do find I get a little bit of like, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, a little bit. I'm like, I actually feel like I'm throwing the tennis ball against the wall in The Shining. You know what I mean? Only after like 3 days, though.
Gertrude Stein said she found being a genius really hard because she had to spend so much time sitting around doing absolutely nothing.
Right, exactly. You know.
So, to get this sort of language going in your head, this music in your head, are there times when you write? Or do you have a daily routine, or do you write in bursts of crazy last-minute application?
After college, because after college I thought, you know, I would be this writer, and I would be, you know, but I'd write when I was inspired. You know what I mean? And that doesn't happen very often, you know, so it'd be like once every 2 months in the middle of the night I'd write like a really good sentence. But other than that, you know, I mean, seriously, but other than that, so I needed to, actually what Columbia helped me with more so than finding my voice was allowing me to feel like I could work, like the discipline, to actually go sit at my desk, and even if nothing's coming out, I can edit something, I can do something, you know, and so it makes it so that way I do try to have more of a routine now.
Can you work anywhere? Can you write like Hemingway in a cafe? Or?
I do like to do that sometimes, yeah, I do find that I used to actually write really, really well on the subway to Columbia. Yeah, I could, when it was like coming home at night after a class that was late, I could like put on my headphones and write, like, it takes me like an hour, and I could write like something I thought was really, I look back at notebooks I found and there was stuff that I wrote in the subway that's in the book, which is surprising to me. But, you know, I did find there was something about, I don't know, there was like a rhythm almost to the beat of the subway. Mm-hmm. And so I like to pretend I can write anywhere, in a sort of like, you know, like you can take a notebook to a cafe and have like a pastis, and you know what I mean? But it's not really that's sort of bullshit too, you know, to me anyway.
And why did this present itself to you as something that had to be told in an omniscient voice? Rather than, say, the kid speaking, it technically is in the first person.
I know, it is technically in the first person, which is, I always forget.
Appears
at some
point.
You know, once or something. I found it so much more interesting to be able to sort of it was easier for me to go in and out of characters' heads if without the rules of what a first-person narrator I thought provided. I wanted to have this, I mean, I had technically a first, but I wanted to be able to sort of bounce around and be both, almost be like with one character and with the narrator, and almost sort of with another character. You know, you don't really know where you stand in a lot of ways, but until I thought the end, and that was what I wanted. That's sort of what I wanted the whole time. You're not sort of sure who to root for.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a very unifying voice, and yet the characters are very distinct. So
right, so you know, you're welcome.
What would constitute success for this book? A reasonable number of readers, or
this? It's I don't care. I don't need anything else.
That's it.
Yeah. This is all I ever wanted.
And you know, your generation has seen as much film as it's read. So do you think your sense of narrative, or your daring and narrative technique, comes at all from an influence of film? Or
I do, yeah, I do. I actually almost like storyboard. I don't write from the beginning to the end. I write scenes, and then I sort of put them where I feel like they need to go, which is actually why when I first handed in the book, the timeline was like a disaster. It'd be like the kid was supposed to be 13, but he's 11. I couldn't keep that straight. But it does help me more to think of it as like where the scene fits best in the narrative versus starting from the beginning. And I do think of writing, I mean, I have it in acts, you know what I mean? And I do think it was sort of inspired by, you know, a love of movies and a kind of a, you know, a cinematic undertaking. And like, I wanted it to be, like, I like, to me, like the closest thing to a novel that isn't a book is like True Detective or something, where you have total control. One guy writes all the words and writes and then he has total control of where he's putting everything. And to me, that almost felt like a novel that you could look at. And I found that a very interesting thing. It was sort of inspiring to think that there could be a voice for novelists in the future when people stop, you know, picking up written books. Which I hope doesn't happen, but I'm just
What do you mean? Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
You think reading has become a minority activity?
I certainly hope not, you know. Right. Not, but in mainstream, I just thought, in a way, I always felt like writing, no matter the medium, is all I want to do. I felt sort of saying I'm only a novelist is almost like pretentious. I just want to write for a living and find my way, and I don't really care, you know, what the medium is, or I'd try anything. You know.
You mean you would try screenplays or something like that?
Sure, absolutely. I'd like to write. I think I'd like to make this into, if I could, try and make this into a show.
A show or a screenplay?
I think either a show or a miniseries. I think I could do like a 5-season. I've thought a lot about it, but having her young and my editor calls it Mad Men on the PCH, which I like. And you know, showing her young and showing beautiful Hollywood and showing all of that stuff, and then tracking her to old age. I'd like to fill all that in. It's like I have that in my head. I just chose not to use it in this book.
Did you have sort of film wishes in your mind when you were writing it?
No, but I don't think that's. I think like I said, this is all I ever wanted. But that's, if I had the opportunity, I'd like to do it. But this, I like the. You know, I feel like there's so many rules and stuff in writing a screenplay that I wasn't. That sort of scared me. You know, for this needed to be its own thing. I needed to have total control of
I think there's an app now that kind of puts it in screenplay language or something like that. Does it? Yes, I think someone told me about it. Yeah, there is.
Right, for everything, you know.
Well, have you the same interest in nonfiction, or is it always just a kind of... not that nonfiction is not imaginative prose, but...
Not memoir.
But I could inventive.
I could do nonfiction, but just not memoir. I would have a hard time. I wouldn't want to write...
No, I meant like reportage or travel or... Yeah,
I liked writing travel stuff. I liked writing sort of scenery. I wouldn't mind writing some interesting sports things, actually, but...
Do you read sports writers?
I don't think there are very many that are any good, but... I like to listen. I'm very interested in it, you know. But I don't read. There's not that many that I like to read, but I do. I am very interested in it. I'd like to have something more. It's either, you know, very, very sports heavy, or it's like really pop culture, sort of, you know, funny. And I'd like to have something that's more sort of serious or something. I mean, I feel like I sound like a blowhard, but, you know, this sort of. I just want to. I wouldn't mind taking a crack at something like that and writing something my way.
It used to be that the sports pages were known to have the best writings.
Yeah, or like the obits, I remember.
Yeah.
And
the obituaries, yeah.
Yeah, right, those were great too. Yeah. And that's what... So I wouldn't... Right, exactly. So, yeah, that's...
So, you know, your writing has a life separate from yourself.
Right.
This book is saying hello, and now it's going on its way. And even if you do a screenplay, the novel is the novel.
The novel's over, yeah.
And as Elizabeth Harper used to say, now you have to just do it again. So what are you doing now?
I think of this book as my LA book, as my sort of... I used to think of it as my Joanna book, but I started to think of it as this sort of... you know, capturing what I think of that, of a certain aspect of that part of the country. And I'm working now, I already started on a book, like a sort of a New York book. Like a book about, you know, staying out too late and the allure that, you know, certain parts of the city provide, but also these sort of how dark the places that can take you are, and how fine the line is between when you're having fun and when you're not. And I have this idea of something I want to capture, you know, and it's almost hard for me to describe, but, you know, like where the rules of going out at night, you know, supersede sort of family and friendship and true morality. Like, so there's a different morality, and I want to try to get that onto the page. Yeah, and, you know, given that I'm from here, and I want to make,
and you know the city.
I know it. You know, yeah. I want to make a similar sort of homage and cautionary tale about what, you know, how like Hollywood can provide this beautiful thing, but also can, you know, take all of your life away. And I think in a similar way, there's a part of New York that's like that too.
It's very easy, especially as a young person, to write and knock things and be critical and be superior. It's much harder to write about the things you love.
Right.
And one of the things I think that comes through in your novel is a kind of, again, empathy and sort of love for this town, these people, their dreams, their mistakes. Do you feel the same about New York? Do you have this passion for New York?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like there's going to be a similar, hopeful, empathy for. I hope I can have the same love for the characters in this book that I do have for Dorothy, and that I can find someone like that I can connect to and empathize with, and sort of have some of the same things that I went through, or maybe provide a prism, where out I can, show what I feel about, there is a real beauty and a real romance to the city. I do think there's like a sort of Paris in the 20s part of the city that exists, and that, almost anyone would want to be a part of, but some people sort of can't handle it. Or some people can handle it too well, and there's something in that I want to. Hopefully there's going to be the same amount of empathy, because otherwise I wouldn't want to do it. I wouldn't want to write something scathing. Well, I don't have any interest in that.
As one early review you had that was slightly annoying, complaining that in a way you didn't sort of condemn anybody, which I thought was a bizarre thing to say.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, I think, one of the appeals you have as an observer is that, you really don't flinch. You will show us everything.
Yeah.
But you're not exploiting them. You're building their world.
Right.
Is this just
they're
you
good,
because
I
you're a
think
nice guy, or because you kind of make an effort to keep your balance as a narrator?
I think good people,
especially in their heads,
good people do bad things, and it's hard. You have to figure out why that is at times. Good people can make real mistakes. And I think I try to bring a sort of heart to all of the characters. I mean, I think with Dale, certain characters I just decided are bad. But if they're not, why not figure out why they make these mistakes?
But you speak as though they pre-exist, and you're not kind of. Well,
for me, they almost, once I got to know them, I mean, I tried to.
They're real in your head?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're real. They are real in my head. I only met. I don't know. To me, they all sort of exist. Like, that's what I meant about the show. Like, I could tell you what they were doing, on a Tuesday in 1974. Even if I didn't write that, I feel like I know what they were doing.
But is writing therapy for you?
Certainly.
Is that a good thing?
Let's see. That's an interesting question.
Or is it an art form? And you're an artist.
It's therapy. No, no. It's. I'd like to. I think it's both. I mean, I think it starts out as a cathartic way for me to explore some of the reasons that I feel terrible at times, and then hopefully it becomes what I need it to become. It becomes art. I mean, it's almost like when you said it's like the characters pre-exist. It's like when they become real, then it's art. Once I figure them out and figure out what they're doing, then I think it is, it's a novel, and it becomes writing, But before then, I do think it's probably exploring some of the inner. It's probably why my early drafts are no good, because it's probably just like me whining, about
I don't think so.
Self-obsessed whining,
but very invested. So these 9 years, there's been some struggle with the manuscript, you feel? I mean, would you take 9 years for the next one if you had to?
If it meant that it came out the way I wanted it to, finding the editor that sort of allowed me to do exactly what I wanted and to fix, the problems that he always had were the ones I was worried about too, the ones I couldn't quite get right. And when I sort of went crazy, that's when he liked that too. So if it meant finding that, yeah, certainly. I could go back and bartend and write another book. I just would rather it's, some of the I mean, I can't say I regret anything, but some of the trials and tribulations of, of getting like a bad agent, and being sort of early on and being sort of exploited. I felt like, and then having that agent really twist my words and change a lot of stuff and whatever. That was really hard because it almost made you want to go like, why? It's almost not even mine anymore. So once I made it mine again, I don't. I hope it's like I hope it doesn't take 9 years, but it could. I don't know.
But you're ready.
9 months.
Your family says no.
Yeah, I know. They won't allow it.
Well, you're not spoiled.
They can't float me any longer.
You're very sort of dedicated. Do we have time for questions from the floor? For maybe someone wants to
questions from
ask
the floor.
him something.
What?
Do it with this mic. Or?
This is fine. I don't.
Do you have any audience questions for Kevin about his writing?
They can be
process?
rude.
It's okay if you don't.
There's
We
one.
got one in the middle.
Questions everything about writing it as a play. Just react.
Wow, interesting. I hadn't thought of that, no, because I like to write the scenery. And I don't know if I could get exactly, I don't know if I could write a play, if something's taking place in Big Sur, I think it'd be hard to get that right in a play. But I do think I could do it. There was somebody suggested a mini-series where a different actress plays her, young, middle, and old. I liked that idea. I thought that was interesting. Yes, Tatum? Oh, okay. She's marked in for old, so if anybody's look at,
I'm not auditioning.
that's what you think. That's it.
All right, question over here.
Do you think that 9 of the years, like a few of the years, were spent like sort of just kind of like recovering from the disappointment?
Yes.
Those years?
100%, yeah.
So it wasn't really 9 years, right?
Well, it took me, but I mean.
Working on it, like there were.
No, but I started 9 years ago. A lot of it was spent wallowing, and I'm not gonna, I don't want to do that anymore.
Right, so you just onward ho, as they say.
Yeah, I took like
So how many versions of it have there been?
Wow. There's been 10 probably. Yeah. There's been there were a lot of different versions. There was, actually the first version it was like half in LA and half in New York. And I didn't feel like that, once I finished that and we had some problems with I sort of felt like I wasn't giving either place that I wanted to write about enough due. I think I needed to go back in and write, like really figure out Joanna and figure out Los Angeles, and then sort of get, hopefully,
Dorothy.
this next thing to get that better and right, because there was this sort of, it was like a character sort of way too based on me, and it was like, that was too therapeutic for sure. Okay. Yeah.
Any short stories using the characters from our town or irrespective of that world?
You mean like, do I have any other short stories? Yeah. They're not any good, but yeah, I mean, I do have. Now, I started to write, like one of the things that really helped me was that actually got me my editor and my publisher was a piece in Vice. Was actually what I read, and my editor read that and wanted to read the rest, and then they figured it all out.
Be more comfortable with the longer form,
Yeah.
short form?
Yeah. I like I like compression, but I don't feel like I want to do I don't feel like I can fill it out enough. Like, I think you can understand something about the characters with short scenes, but I don't have I'm not good at beginning, middle, and end. You know what I mean? So I have a hard time sometimes with thinking about getting everything I want. One scene I could write just gets one part of the character.
Yeah. So you need them
And I need to sort of build
accumulate
it
your
out.
crew.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to try. I think I should probably do that now, but
No, do what, your characters
what I want.
demand.
right.
Yeah. But you certainly have the dramatic instinct to build a scene, and you do know that a sentence has a beginning, middle, and end, so I think that's pretty good.
That's about all the time that we have for the conversation.
Oh my God.